Next on Currents News, a big day for President Trump. He's cut a new deal with Canada and Mexico to replace NAFTA, and he's defending Judge Brett Kavanaugh. The disaster is unimaginable. Indonesia is reeling after a giant tsunami and earthquake. We'll have reports from the scene and see the Pope pray for the people. On the streets of Williamsburg, Catholics honor a beloved saint, Padre Pio, on the anniversary of his death. Plus, surprising new information about young couples getting married. They're staying that way, and the divorce rate is plummeting. The news starts right now.
This new deal will be the most modern, up-to-date, and balanced trade agreement in the history of our country.
The new deal is with Mexico and Canada and replaces NAFTA. Our other big story, the president on the Kavanaugh investigation.
I actually think it's a good thing for Judge Kavanaugh. I think it's actually a good thing, not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing.
Also, the president has sent new orders to the FBI. Hi, I'm Ed Wilkinson. Liz Faublas is off tonight. Two big stories tonight. We begin with the trade deal. The president is calling it a landmark that will send cash and jobs pouring into the U.S. Natasha Chen reports the very latest.
Throughout the campaign, I promised to renegotiate NAFTA, and today we have kept that promise.
President Donald Trump says the newly named United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, is the largest U.S. trade deal ever made. The agreement came together hours before the October 1st deadline.
There were a number of moments when the thing could have died. They kept picking it up, kept pressing the case.
The deal requires 40 to 45% of auto content be made by workers earning at least $16 an hour.
The most advanced protections for workers ever.
And requires more of a vehicle's parts to be made in North America in order for the car to be free from tariffs. Automaker Ford says it's very encouraged by this. Quote, the benefits of scale and global reach will help to drive volume and support manufacturing jobs.
Dairy was a deal breaker.
In a win for the U.S., the deal will also open up some of Canada's dairy market to U.S. farmers that could produce better prices in the U.S.
Milk, butter, cheese, yogurt, and ice cream.
This deal must be signed by Congress within 60 days, a Congress that could include a Democratic-controlled House after midterm elections.
There could be Democratic support for this. There's a lot of things worked into these agreements with Mexico and Canada that are very helpful to workers and labor unions, for that matter. So let's see. We might be surprised.
In Washington, Natasha Chen, Currents News.
Now our other top story, President Trump and the FBI investigation of Brett Kavanaugh. He's backing his Supreme Court nominee while giving the Bureau new orders. Omar Jimenez with the latest on the developing story.
I want it to be comprehensive.
President Trump weighing in on the ongoing investigation into his Supreme Court nominee, Brett Kavanaugh.
Now, with that being said, I'd like it to go quickly.
The FBI would take its direction from the White House, not the Senate, and that the agency would interview a handful of people. But President Trump says the FBI should interview anyone they want, within reason.
You have to say within reason. They should interview, but they should also be guided, and I'm being guided, by what the senators are looking for.
Should Brett Kavanaugh be interviewed by the FBI?
I think so.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell calling the Kavanaugh probe itself purely political.
That his good name and his family have been dragged through the mud with a campaign of character assassination based on allegations that lack any corroboration.
The investigation began on the tail end of a chaotic week in Washington. Arizona Senator Jeff Flake, a key vote to confirm Kavanaugh, set conditions in his support. An FBI investigation, limited in scope, and only lasting up to a week before moving toward any final vote.
I couldn't move forward without hitting the pause button because what I was seeing, experiencing in an elevator and watching it in committee and just thinking this is ripping our country apart.
The investigation is expected to include interviews with several people who Christine Blasey Ford said were present at the party where she alleges the assault happened, and not expected to include Kavanaugh's drinking history. In Washington, Omar Jimenez, Currents News.
Today is the opening of the Supreme Court's new term. The Red Mass to celebrate that was held at Washington's Cathedral of St. Matthew the Apostle on Sunday. As he exited the church, Attorney General Jeff Sessions was heckled. The Red Mass celebrates public officials. The homilist, Monsignor Peter Vaughan, urged attendees to seek the Holy Spirit's healing power. Indonesia is reeling from a catastrophic earthquake and tsunami that struck the island of Sulawesi on Friday. The full scale of the destruction is still unclear. We have team coverage of the devastation, beginning with Kim Hutchison.
Across Indonesia, a desperate scene after a deadly quake and tsunami left a widespread path of destruction. The death toll now tops more than 800 people, and Indonesian officials fear that number will likely climb even higher. That's because rescuers are desperately digging through the rubble, searching for survivors.
A baby boy in a drainage ditch, actually, was alive and was safe. Can't find the parents, but, managed to not perish in that.
On Friday, a 7.5 magnitude quake struck an Indonesian island and triggered a powerful tsunami. Cell phone video captured the moment the tsunami came ashore. Officials say the tsunami unleashed waves about 10 feet high and sent people running for higher ground. Indonesian authorities estimate that 2.4 million people were impacted by the disaster, and even the Red Cross is having a hard time reaching those who need it the most.
Roads are damaged, bridges are down, so it's hard enough to get into the major urban areas, but it's even more so difficult to get into the more remote, rural communities, rural areas, small towns that are farther inland.
Hundreds were severely injured, and thousands who survived are now homeless and struggling to find basics like food and water.
It's a very grueling, it's a very emotional experience for everybody that's involved, and it's still not finished.
I'm Kim Hutcherson reporting.
Hardest hit by the killer waves and the shaking earth was the Indonesian city of Palu. The search for survivors is desperate. Matt Rivers reports from Sulawesi.
The situation in Palu and surrounding areas continues to get worse at this point as rescuers try to do their best to reach those people trapped underneath the rubble. They're trying to get a broader assessment of the total damage in this area because so many places at this point are inaccessible to rescuers. So really, even though we have official numbers, official death tolls, hundreds of injuries that have been reported, we do expect those numbers to go way up at this point. We know that at least 800, more than 800 people have been killed so far. That's going to go up. We know that well into the hundreds of people have been injured. That's going to continue to go up as rescuers get more and more access to the areas that have been affected. The big thing here, though, is going to be trying to create greater access for rescuers. Roadways continue to be blocked. Landslides have been a huge issue. The airport really hasn't been operating in this area, both to commercial and even military flights. Some military flights have gotten through, but certainly not the kind of aid that is needed for these people. So it's really all about access at this point and also bringing in that kind of heavy equipment that is needed by rescuers to try and get people out of the rubble. This, of course, becomes a much easier job during the daylight. It is, of course, evening right now. Hopefully rescuers can be aided when the sun begins to rise, but clearly, given all those issues I just talked about, in addition to the fact that there's a lack of food, water, and health care in this area, authorities have a major challenge in front of them as they continue to work desperately to try and save lives. I'm Matt Rivers on Sulawesi in Indonesia.
Pope Francis is mourning the Indonesian tragedy. Sunday, he remembered the victims.
Prego per I defunti purtroppo numerosi, per I feriti e per quanti hanno perso la casa e il lavoro. Il Signore li consoli e sostenga gli sforzi di quanti si stanno impegnando a portare soccorso.
The Pope invited pilgrims to join in praying the Hail Mary for those affected. News tonight on the whereabouts of ex-Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. He's begun his life of prayer and penance at a Capuchin friary in Kansas. Pope Francis removed McCarrick from ministry, and he resigned as cardinal earlier this year after abuse allegations were found credible. The Holy Father ordered him to live in prayer and penance. Pennsylvania's Attorney General Josh Shapiro is keeping secret an investigation into sexual abuse allegations against a high-ranking state university official. That stands in sharp contrast to Shapiro's well-publicized effort to force the Catholic Church to be more transparent about clerical sex abuse, and his release of a lengthy grand jury report of Pennsylvania dioceses. Some 1,300 criminal sex offenders could be on the loose in Missouri. A new state audit out today found that police don't know the whereabouts of the offenders, including hundreds who fall into the most dangerous category. The missing people represent about 8% of the state's 16,000 registered sex offenders. Other states have had similar problems keeping track of their offenders, including 2,700 in Wisconsin and 1,800 in Massachusetts. There's a lot more news headed your way. The beloved Padre Pio is honored on the streets of Brooklyn with a procession and mass in Williamsburg. The reasons why divorce rates in the U.S. are dropping sharply. We'll talk with a young Catholic couple and a priest who mentors the engaged. Brooklyn's Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio and Cardinal Timothy Dolan head up a new celebration to honor the men and women who keep New York safe. Do you have a story idea? Is something happening in your parish we should know about? We want to hear from you. Keep this email handy, newstips@thesalesmedia.org. Email us. We'll be right back. It's a Jubilee year for St. Padre Pio. Devotees around the world are celebrating 50 years since the saint passed and 100 years since he received the stigmata. Among them are faithful from the Diocese of Brooklyn. Currents News' Katie Engesser has that story.
Catholics devoted to St. Padre Pio filled the streets of Williamsburg to honor the holy man after he returned to the Lord in 1968.
He's a saint of our days.
Padre Pio was a Capuchin monk from Italy, born in the late 19th century. During his ministry, he gained a reputation for granting miracles.
My husband had a stroke, and they had to do brain surgery. I went to the recovery room, and I just went to fix his pillow, and right under his pillow was a little medallion of Padre Pio.
After his ordination to the priesthood, Jesus and Mary appeared to Pio and gave him the wounds of Christ, the stigmata. He was assigned to San Giovanni Rotondo, an Italian agricultural community, and as news of his stigmata spread, Pio's holy reputation increased.
I was in the 5th grade. We have a trip to go to see this man, this monk. He was a very humble man.
I saw him live in Italy, San Giovanni Rotondo. He was a tough father. He was tough.
After the outdoor procession from St. Francis of Paola Church, the Bishop of Brooklyn, Nicholas DiMarzio, led the devotees in an Italian Mass in honor of Padre Pio at Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church.
He's very, very good at answering prayers, and that's why I think people pray to him.
Bishop DiMarzio learned Italian from his immigrant grandparents and looks up to the patron saint of Italy.
He is really one who can relate to, as a confessor, as somebody who tried to help people become better.
And a saint who has inspired people all around the globe. Each year, some 7 million pilgrims visit the Padre Pio shrine in San Giovanni Rotondo. Brooklynites say that's because Padre Pio is a saint for the people.
After he's dead, he's more alive now than one before.
I look at him, or I talk about him, I feel like, he listened to me.
In Williamsburg, Katie Engesser, Currents News.
The first annual Guardian Mass was held today. Brooklyn's Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio and Cardinal Timothy Dolan celebrated the Mass this afternoon at St. Patrick's Cathedral. The Guardian Mass honors the great sacrifices made by the men and women of New York City agencies who give their lives to ensure the safety of New Yorkers.
They put their lives on the line constantly, and we are a safer city because of their presence. So today we honor them. We pray for them on this feast.
The chaplains of New York City safety agencies also served at the Mass. More and more younger couples are saying "I do" and sticking to it. According to new data, divorce rates are dropping in the United States among millennials. Currents News' Tim Harfman reports on a Catholic couple hoping to continue that trend.
Sammy Venegas and his wife Natasha have been friends since 2009, but didn't get married until 2016.
Knowing each other for so many years, I think that's the key for our relationship.
Now in their early 30s, they're part of a growing trend among millennial couples, waiting for the right one and the right time before tying the knot. A new study from the University of Maryland found the U.S. divorce rate dropped 18% from 2008 to 2016, mainly due to younger people staying in wedlock.
We want to make sure that we're stable in a job, that we, are financially stable to begin starting a family, as opposed to maybe our grandparents.
And among those couples, the divorce rate doubled for people aged 55 to 64 and tripled for Americans 65 and older, according to Bowling Green's National Center for Family and Marriage Research. Christian Rada is the director of Marriage, Family Life, and Respect Life for the Brooklyn Diocese. He's not surprised that millennials wait.
They want a relationship that is authentic and real, and that is not rushed.
He found that in Brooklyn and Queens, the average age for Catholic couples getting married has grown compared to previous generations.
Couples are getting married in their 30s and 40s. 40s is pretty much the latest.
With one-year-old Isabella at their side, Sammy and Natasha find themselves happily married. And now was the right time to have a family.
When we first met, we're like, you know what? We love each other. We definitely want to spend the rest of our life with each other. But we're gonna let time and we're gonna let God kind of move in this relationship.
Their advice to other millennials is to have faith.
Trust in yourself, trust in your potential spouse, and trust in the will of God that when the time is right, you'll find, if that's your vocation, you'll find the right person.
Tim Harfman, Currents News.
There is another part to the marriage story. Father Mark Swartwager of Our Lady of Grace Church in Howard Beach works with couples, and he joins us now. Father Mark, as Tim just reported, marriage among millennials seems to be holding up and the divorce rate is plummeting. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I think there's two factors that are contributing to the divorce rate going down. Within the cohort of the millennials, there's less of them getting married, and so by consequence, there's less of them getting divorced. But I think within that group, they're also getting married later. And so I think that's helping them to approach marriage with maybe their eyes wide open. I think they're coming a little bit more mature, a little bit more educated, and a little bit more realistic to what they're going to find in marriage.
Is that your experience in the parish? Are there fewer marriages in the church these days over the course of a year?
There are fewer, yes. We're definitely preparing less couples for the sacrament of marriage. And the ones that are coming forward tend to be late 20s, like 27 to 35.
But a lot of young people are still getting together, and they are having children. They're just not getting married. That must present some pastoral problems to the church. Say, like when if a couple comes, they're not married, and they present a child for baptism. What do you say to them?
Well, we definitely encourage a conversation. I always try to stop the interview process at that time for baptism, the application, and getting all the paperwork, and kind of focus on their relationship. And I try to encourage them to really look at their life together and to realize that they're already living many of the fruits of what a marriage is, and that there's many blessings that can be received through the sacrament. And so it's definitely an opportunity to evangelize and to catechize.
Why does the church insist on the permanence of marriage?
I think because we see the family as such an important part of the church. Each family is an ecclesial body. We call it the cell of the church. And if the cell is strong and vibrant and living with the values and the belief of faith, is going to strengthen the rest of the church. And
one of the things I know that you've got some experience with is working in what we call the engaged encounter. What is the engaged encounter, and how does that help prepare people for marriage?
Well, it's a marriage preparation program that kind of comes out of the family of Marriage Encounter. The Marriage Encounter movement realized that they wanted to help young couples to prepare well for marriage. And so it's a weekend retreat where they spend with other couples like themselves looking at marriage, but really it's a focusing on themselves to look at where they are in their relationship. It's an opportunity to maybe raise some questions with them by listening to other couples who have gone through marriage for 10, 15 years or 50 or however many years. And so they look through their life and their preparation, and they're given an opportunity to look at, have they asked the questions about finance, or have they looked at how they communicate, or I think one of the greatest benefits of the Engage Encounter weekend is that it is a weekend away, a retreat, and so it's an opportunity to teach the couples how to pray.
What else can the church do to encourage marriage?
Well, Pope Francis has come out with the idea of a new catechumenate for married couples. Following the RCIA process, a catechumenate is one who is preparing for a sacrament. And so here it would be to maybe re-evangelize the young couple in their faith so that they really understand what it is that they're partaking in when they give their vows on their wedding day.
Great. Father Mark, thanks for coming in and sharing your thoughts with us.
You're welcome. Great to be here.
The new Brooklyn Seminary is growing. Bishop DiMarzio visited Italy last month, where he participated in a 3-day retreat with seminary candidates. The event featured hundreds of young men from all over the world gathered to begin priestly formation. 3 of those young men are joining the Brooklyn Diocese. They will join the current 12 men in formation at the Diocesan Missionary House in Douglaston. The highly anticipated Youth and Vocations Synod at the Vatican begins this Wednesday. Pope Francis has called for representatives from around the world to address 2 important questions: how to show the faith in a credible and attractive way, and how to help the youth make definitive decisions about their vocations. Pope Francis will kick off the event by celebrating Mass in St. Peter's Square. Still to come on Currents News, dramatic video of the U.S. Navy saving all the passengers aboard a jetliner that went down in the ocean. And President Trump gives the nation's highest honor to an Army war hero. We'll be right back. U.S. sailors to the rescue. New video tonight shows members of the Navy rushing to help after a jetliner crashed in Micronesia last Friday. According to officials, the pilot missed the runway in the rain and wound up in the ocean. The sailors went aisle by aisle looking for victims. All 47 passengers are believed to have survived, and no serious injuries have been reported. An Army hero credited with saving his teammates' lives is the latest recipient of the Medal of Honor. Army medic Ronald J. Schur II was one of the last U.S. Special Forces soldiers to land in eastern Afghanistan in 2008. His unit was pinned down during battle, and that's when he sprung into action. Today, he was rewarded.
Several weeks ago, my staff asked Ron and his wife, Miranda, thank you, Miranda, to a meeting in the West Wing. They didn't know what it was about. They walked into the Oval Office, and I told Ron that he was going to receive our nation's highest military honor.
Ronald currently works on the Secret Service counter-assault team. Well, that is Currents News. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ed Wilkinson. Set your DVR to record this program so that you never miss it, because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.